I was lying in bed, and I'm sure it was God who spoke to me, said, I want you to go to Africa for me. And that was another panic in my life. What do I do with this? Well, I grew up in a nominal Christian family, but I had no personal understanding of the gospel. I had a terrible experience just before I went to university. We went on holiday to Cornwall, and my father had just had a serious operation, so he was a bit weak from it, but he wanted to swim at the Tintagel Cove. And he swam out to the mouth of the cove and then got into difficulties and drowned. And so for the first time I saw somebody dead, and it was my father. And it really shook my world. I didn't have an answer to that. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? I didn't know what I'd do in the future. And so that set me on a path of trying to find answers. But at university, in my second term, I had to queue up to register. And in front of me was a guy who'd been at the same school as me. He had the school tie on. So I started speaking with him. And he turned out to be a theological student. And through him, I came to Jesus. I saw in his life what I wanted, and it totally revolutionized my life. And then one day, a missionary came to our Christian Union, and he spoke about the slums of southern Africa. And I knew that's where God was calling me. And so after I'd finished university, I was still a young Christian. I did the one thing I said I'd never do. I taught for a year. I made a vow to myself, I will never be involved in anything that involves public speaking, learning languages, or teaching. And all three I had to do. I ended up learning a bit of 19 languages. The guy who spoke at our Christian Union, he was the representative of a little mission in southern Africa that worked in this particular area of urban evangelism, but especially in the slums. I went to see them afterwards. We became great friends. So after my year of teaching, I applied. I went out to Africa as a young 24-year-old and suddenly found myself thrust into the middle of an extraordinary range of experiences. I actually went to a Bible school out there. I was to do that for 2 years, but then there was insufficient staff to keep it going for the second term, the beginning of *63. And so the leader of the mission called me to his office and he said, I want you to go to the Eastern Cape where the amaXhosa live. That's the name of the people. And I want you to arrange a double prayer conference. Wow. I'd just been 4 months in the country. And he gave me an assistant and off I went. And we ran these 2 conferences and they were brilliant. And it worked so well. He asked me to do the same in Kenya. So I then started to learn Swahili. But that set me on a course not only for evangelism, but also to help Africans pray. So I then began to write what I knew of what was going on in the world so that people had prayer items. So when I got back to South Africa a few months later, the leader of the mission said to me, well, you really ought to put that in a book. And so this was it. This was the first one. The first Operation World. That was 1963. Oh, 64 actually. So basically it says a little bit about what the country is like, and then it gives various key prayer points for that country. I was beginning to then work leading a team of African brothers and sisters who'd often come from very difficult backgrounds. And so I realized that my bigger job was not winning new people to Jesus, which we are doing, but was to help them become mighty men and women of God in a time of apartheid, when white missionaries didn't think that Africans would ever be able to lead. And I said, this is wrong. And so we worked in an opposite way when I moved up to Zimbabwe, but many of them became wonderful servants of God. We went through trials and so on, but God took us through.